The bridge exercise. You will see it in most Pilates classes, definitely in the vast majority of my classes, because it is a relatively accessible exercise. You can start with it right from beginners and then take it all the way through advanced. It is incredible for most of the things that most of us experience as restrictions or tightness or stiffness in our bodies. Plus, it's a very strengthening exercise. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily easy to perfect. So today we're going to break down the elements of a bridge and help you to do it better and to feel the benefits of it. Because remember, it doesn't matter what the exercise is, it doesn't matter at all what it looks like, as long as it feels great in your body. But there are a couple of things that we want to keep in mind when we're doing bridge. The first thing that I will say is a Pilates bridge and a yoga bridge are quite different. They might look kind of similar, but the thing that if you're experienced with yoga, which I'm not, what I know is a little bit, but I have spoken to a lot of yoga teachers about this. I have a lot of yoga teacher friends. And a yoga bridge is preparing your back, your thoracic spine, and your spine in general for extension, where a Pilates bridge is not. So in a yoga bridge, you will be encouraged to lift your chest bone as high as you can, as well as lifting your pelvis and your tailbone quite high. And that's not the same thing with Pilates, okay? And I'll take you through some of those movements on the mat in a sec. The other thing that I want you to keep in mind when you're doing bridge is that it is absolutely an exercise for strengthening the back of your body. So most of us could do with a little bit of work in the hamstrings and in the calves. And the most common thing that I hear about bridge is it feels like my hamstrings are about to explode, or I have to come out of it because my hamstrings are going to spasm. Generally, that means that you need to do this bridge work just a little bit more. I'm not saying to grin and bear it, but I am saying implement the things, the tips and tools that I'm going to give you to see can you stay in that bridge for just a second longer, and then build it up, and then build it up, and then build it up. Because something like a bridge, when we're holding it at the top, it's what we call an isometric contraction of the muscle. And that's really important for the muscle to be able to do and do well, because that is how, one, we help the muscle to absorb impact from the ground, but two, to be able to create contractions around the joints. So we want a certain amount of muscle stiffness to be able to contract, to have the joint in a really good place and in a really good position to take the impact from the ground when we're walking or when we're running, or even to push us up and out of a chair and things like that. Okay, so let's come to the mat and let's break down the bridge. I'm just gonna pop my socks off. Okay, so when you are bridging, the first thing that you're gonna wanna do is pull your heels as close into your backside as you can. The further away your feet are, actually, the more challenging it's going to be because it's a longer lever. So you can get your heels right in underneath your knees. That's going to make it a little bit easier. But if you can't do that right here, because this might be challenging, feel free to adjust as you lift the tail, okay? You will have often heard me say in a class, press your feet through the floor. And if you press your feet through the floor, you'll see that my pelvis starts to hover all about itself. And there actually isn't really much work here in holding my pelvis in this hovered position because my feet are holding me up. In much the same way that if you think about yourself in standing, you're on quite a small base. For the mass of your body, your feet are quite small structures, but they keep you up because we've got all of these mechanisms, all of these muscle contractions to keep us upright. And so when we really access the feet and we push down, that helps to just float the pelvis. Now the other thing we want to do is push down and also get a sense of pulling the mat back towards your backside. When we push down and pull back, even if you just try it without lifting the pelvis, push and pull, get a sense of the heel coming back to you. You're going to wake up the muscle in the back of your thigh. You're going to wake up that hamstring, which is what you need to do to stand in your legs, okay? When we come into bridge, we don't want to just lift the pelvis. We want to lift just your tailbone. You'll feel your lower back gently rock into the mat. And then we start to send your seat bones along the backs of your legs, along your hamstrings, as your knees reach over your toes. We're standing strong in the foot, and we keep the knees in line with the hips and the toes. We don't let them fall out to the sides. So from the back, that looks like this. We want to make sure the knees don't open out so that we stay standing in both of those legs. Then from there, we press through the feet, we lift the tail, we send the seat bones along the backs of the hamstrings, and we're sending the back of the pelvis up into the front of the pelvis. And we've got a little tuck in the tail. That would be a neutral spine. Let me get my arms out of the way. That would be an arched back, neutral spine, tucked pelvis. You don't need to tuck too much. What happens if we tuck too much, and you might have heard about coming up vertebra by vertebra and then trying to come down vertebra by vertebra. In my experience, that actually causes us to come up in chunks and come down in chunks, which is the very thing that we're actually trying to avoid. So when you lift, the tailbone lifts. We want to then reach away. Use the knees reaching forwards, which is going to reach your thigh bones forwards, which is going to lift your pelvis up. All right, we're in that little tilt. And this is what I was saying. In yoga, you would be encouraged to lift your ribs up as well, because we're preparing for a back bend. In Pilates, what we want you to do is not push through the arms, because of course, if you push through the arms, you're going to open the chest into extension. When we've got heavy arms and we roll the tailbone and we lift the pelvis, I want you to almost get a sense of that arm bone rolling inwards. You don't need to turn it in, but just imagine it's rolling in. And that chest bone is actually going to drop back and down. These lower ribs are going to drop into the wall of your abdominals. So that actually we're more in a flexed upper spine than in an extended upper spine. That's quite important to get a sense of, because then that means that we lift up into this straight line that we talk about, from the shoulder through the ribs to the hips to the knees. So we get this sort of perfect slope in the body. And then from there, we can really use the legs. The other thing that's important to remember is we want to get into your legs, your glutes and your hamstrings. So we roll the tail, slide the seat bones along the hamstrings, reach the knees and stay standing in your legs. Now, this is me dropping my ribs, allowing my pelvis to line up with my rib cage and my shoulder and my knee. If I push my arms and try to push my ribs up, notice how I rock backwards. There's a little bit more weight in my head now. But if I be heavy but soft in my arms, drop the ribs, then I can reach my knees forwards and the backs of my thighs switch on a little bit more. We'll often always use the arms, or we'll often also use the arms to get us into nice upper rib movement. So we stand in the feet, lift the tail, roll the seat bones, and then reach the knees to lift. To do that, we're going to let the arms open overhead. To come down, we roll the ribs into the mat by rolling the arms forward. That shoulder blade is connected onto the ribs. So where the ribs go, the shoulder blade will often follow, or where the shoulder blade goes, the ribs will follow. And when we take the arms from here to here, that shoulder blade is sliding around and it's going to invite those ribs to drop down, and that's where we get that really lovely dropping down segmentally through the spine. So we're remembering standing in the feet, dropping into the ribs, using nice and soft breaths, making sure that we're not clenching the jaw, and that a little bit of discomfort in your hamstrings is absolutely fine. The other thing that's important to think about bridge is once you're used to being in this position, and maybe we can take a leg up and do all of those sorts of exercises, then we can start to walk the legs away from us. And this is where bridging becomes even more functional, because now if you look at this position, if you were to flip the camera around, it would look like I was taking a step, like I was running. And so bridging exercises, we can add some heels, some ankle movements. We can do some single leg work. We can put your feet on a foam roller and add a challenge. We can put your feet on a box and add a challenge. When we get good at that basic bridge, especially the dropping of the ribs and the curling up of the tail, the accessing the backs of the legs and the calves, that mobility in the ankle, and the ability to move our spine and breathe, then we can take it to those more challenging variations to have it super functional so we can strengthen ourselves for walking or running or other activities on the mat.